basically we're trying to get to sleep. That's our whole thing here. Okay. There's a lot of factors at play, but broadly you could kind of collapse them down into two key categories. This notion of sleep drive, which is how tired you are.
Yeah.
You know, when you've just woken up in the morning and you've sort of woken yourself up properly, very hard to have another 8 hours sleep.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you don't have any more sleep drive.
Yeah.
However, if you've been up for 24 hours and you're absolutely ragged, you've got tons of sleep drive, so it's relatively easy to fall asleep.
Yeah. So sleep drive is the stuff that helps to make you feel sleepy.
Yeah. So sleepiness, if you like. Okay. And then we've got arousal, which is the stuff that's keeping us awake.
Yes.
All right. So that might be, you've got a lot of troubles and that's really stressing you out, or something dreadful's just happened and you're freaked out. Okay.
Or there's stuff going on inside the body.
Sure.
So stuff that you've been eating, stuff that you've been drinking, pharmaceutical stuff that you've been taking, and all of these things are going to influence your sleep arousal. So we're going to get into how these actually, what are the different components of it and how they impact on sleep.
But before we dig deep though, basically the bottom line, if you like, is if your tiredness, if your sleep drive is greater than your arousal, you'll fall asleep. And you pretty much have no choice about that. Okay. Whereas if your sleep drive is less than your arousal, so maybe you're not very tired and you're super freaked out, you're going to be awake, and you've pretty much got no choice about that.
Yeah. Okay. So for the first one being circadian rhythm, this is simply your body clock. Most of you have probably heard about this. The idea that if you are waking up at the same time every day, you're eating your meals at roughly the same time throughout the day, and then going to bed at the same time every night, and you're relatively consistent on that, you're going to have a good circadian rhythm. Why is this important for sleep?
Well, if your circadian rhythm is out, the things in your brain that cue you to fall asleep basically aren't cueing you at the right time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there are bits of your body that sort of say, hey, it's time to wake up and start the day. But if that's happening at the wrong time of day, it's a problem. So shift work and international travel and that kind of stuff can really play havoc with that.
Yeah. Okay. So shift workers and travel, as you said, but also this idea of social jet lag. So the people who have to work Monday, Friday, get up at 6 on a Monday, go to work, go to bed at 9 o'clock Monday night, do that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night, I don't have to go to work tomorrow. I'm going to stay out and watch a movie, go to bed maybe 2 hours later, Saturday have a sleep in because you can, maybe you're lucky enough and you don't have kids, and then kind of have a late night Saturday night, sleep in till kind of midday on Sunday, and then go, oh, I've got to go to work on Monday, I better go to bed early, so I'll go to bed at 9 o'clock, and your body goes, dude, I've only been awake for 12 hours, I don't have enough sleep drive to get you to sleep yet. So what we call kind of social jet lag, of where that movement happens too much with the circadian rhythm, right? Chronotype's the next one. Now, I hadn't even heard about, well, I hadn't really understood much about this until I started doing the research myself into sleep. So you know how there's some people who are more like you, morning people.
Yep.
You like getting up at like
early,
5. Yeah. Your peak period of alertness is kind of about 10, 11 in the morning.
Yeah, I get my best work done in the morning.
In the morning?
Sure.
And then you start kind of crashing in the afternoon and you're kind of in bed by 8 o'clock.
Yeah, well, by 3 in the afternoon, I'm not performing at my best. If you're trying to get any sense out of me at 5 in the afternoon, good luck with that.
I've noticed.
Yeah.
I've noticed.
And I'm getting sleepy at 8 o'clock, I might be chilling out and getting pretty sleepy.
Yeah.
So
we call that a morning lark. So people who have a biological predisposition to prefer to be awake in the mornings and have their peak period of alertness early in the mornings. Then you've also got night owls. So this is the other end of the spectrum of people who would prefer to get up at, say, 9, 10, 11. Their peak period of alertness is probably more actually kind of early afternoon, so after lunch. But they'll probably also have lunch a bit later. They'll have dinner a bit later. They're not wanting to go to bed until probably closer to midnight. And they're the ones who, if you try and make them to go to bed at 8 o'clock, they're just not functioning. But if you try and make them wake up at 6 o'clock, they're also not functioning.
Yeah, so most teenagers seem to gravitate for whatever reason into the night owl kind of chronotype.
Yeah.
And then what happens is as they get older, some stay that and some become more kind of morning larks.
Yeah, and this is to do with the kind of rewiring of the brain, that as their brain transforms from child brain into adult brain, this happens during sleep and more of a genetic predisposition. So I know I got tagged as the lazy teenager when I was sleeping till 11 o'clock on weekends, but there was a biological predisposition to be a night owl chronotype in adolescence, and it made my brain bigger, so it was totally fine.
Does that mean my brain's more mature than yours?
Mature? Okay. Yes, you are more mature than I am. Okay, so you've got about 40% of the population are what we call morning larks, about 30% is night owls. The rest of us, they technically don't have a term within the literature. I refer to us as pigeons because we're just kind of generic in the middle, right? So I'm happiest when I'm getting up at about 7. I'm functioning well kind of late morning, early afternoon. but by about 9 o'clock I'm pretty much done. So we kind of prefer the middle hours of the day. If you know what your chronotype is, then you need to work with it, all right? So this is important in understanding if you have a 9-hour chronotype and you work in an industry that requires you to be up at 4 o'clock every morning, you're really gonna struggle with that. So if you know what your natural chronotype is, and this is also kind of based on your genetic predisposition and your kind of biological components, not just how is your lifestyle adapted to you being kind of preferring to stay up late because that's when the good TV shows are on or whatever, then if you can able to work your lifestyle to fit with your chronotype, then you're going to get a better outcome in your sleep.
I agree.
Melatonin, go.
Okay, so melatonin is something that our brain will synthesize, but it won't synthesize it if you're exposed to a lot of bright light. Okay, so if you're out, it's a sunny day, you're at the beach, whatever, you're not making any melatonin. Okay, but the sun goes down, if you don't have tons of artificial light on, your body will start to secrete melatonin. Melatonin doesn't so much make you sleepy, it more sort of helps facilitate the falling asleep process. Yeah,
so I've heard a metaphor of like, if sleep was like a running race, melatonin's more like the starting pistol. So it's the thing that says, start getting ready for sleep. So as your kind of the light receptors within your eyeballs identify the reduction of the light in your environment, it goes through your suprachiasmatic nucleus and releases melatonin from your pineal gland, don't you know? And from that, you kind of then it will start the process of going, okay, it's getting dark outside, it's time to start getting ready for sleep.
So what I'd say about this one is, I mean, if you do have troubles falling asleep, one thing to try is have your house lights as dim as you can have them. I mean, you don't want to be walking into walls and things, but from sunset onwards, if you can just have some lamps going, this kind of thing, you'll find it's actually got quite a soporific effect. When you're sort of getting around in just some warm lighting, say, I've got like some salt lamps, which are really nice light. You know, everyone in my household is, you know, ready to crash out.
I do the same thing, kind of from 6 o'clock is start getting ready for bed for my children because they're little, and blinds go down, overhead lights go off, the lamps, and it's particularly picking the warm white with a light globe, something equivalent to like 40 watts in the old standards. And everything just gets really kind of dark and quiet, and then the brain can kind of start preparing body for sleep. What I see with my patients is more, they'll be up late, all the lights are on, they're watching TV, playing on their iPad, doing work on their laptop, and they go, oh, it's 10 o'clock, I better go to bed, flick everything off, getting to bed, and it's almost like the brain's going, what's just happened? So the brain then kind of, and the body has this kind of catch-up process of, oh my God, we better get ready for sleep now, which is why people find that they're laying in bed wide awake, unable to wind down, and extends what we call their sleep latency. How much time does it take for you to fall asleep?
So the kind of light that's really helpful, I mean, you need some light to get around. I mean, candlelight would be ideal, right? But it's not super practical, okay? If you think about it, like back in the day, we were all sitting around by fires and things, and you get sort of stare at the fire and get sleepy and go to bed. So that orangey yellow quality of light is the best.
That's what you want.
The bright, the modern LED, really bright, cool white is kind of the worst.
Yes, it is. It is.
So some people who must work with screens and things will wear these blue blocking sunglasses.
Yeah, they're called amber glasses.
So I mean, that's something you can try if you're stuck.
Interesting research that also showed very effective for people having a manic episode in bipolar.
Yes.
We've actually got a link of that up onto our website. If you go into the sleep page, I've put up the link to the research on that. All right, adenosine. Okay, so this is the chemical that is actually the kind of primary component of the thing that makes you feel sleepy. So, ideally speaking, if you've had a good night of sleep and you wake up feeling restored and refreshed, your adenosine, this black line here, it's at 0. And then over the course of the day, it's almost like for every hour you're awake, it builds and it builds and it builds and it builds until it gets to kind of a critical threshold where you go, okay, that's enough now, I'm tired. And you go to sleep, and then while you're sleeping, your adenosine gets consumed.
So, that's right. So that's it. So the black line's the adenosine. As we're awake, our metabolic processes, especially the ones in the brain, but everywhere, there's like if you like, it's a byproduct of our metabolism. Is this adenosine stuff? So we build it up and we build it up. So if you do lots of exercise, you build up more of it. That's why you tend to sleep better after exercise. Okay. But just being awake will build it up for you. Okay.
Which is more exercise will build it up faster.
Well, to a higher amount,
Okay.
So it builds up, all right? And then it's often gone down here, that's because you've fallen asleep. Okay, so when you're asleep, your body's recycling it.
This red line here kind of indicates our arousal. So your arousal may be up and down throughout the day. Ideally, what we want is for your arousal to get to a point where it is low enough that it kind of drops under the threshold of your adenosine. So you've got enough sleep drive that you go, okay, I'm really tired, and your body goes, yeah, I'm ready for sleep now, and you kind of chill and drop into it. And then while you're asleep, your arousal is kind of straight down, pretty well non-existent, ideally, except for nightmares, but we're going to come back to that. The last one on the sleep drive is sleep associations. Now, this is kind of most commonly seen if you think about kids and sleep. So particularly as new parents, we spend months training our children, trying to learn how to sleep. There's a bunch of things that we will do to try and assist with that. One of the most obvious ones is swaddling. So kind of swaddle them up until kind of 3-4 months of age, whenever they start rolling. And that has a couple of functions. One, it stops them from punching themselves in the face because they don't have control of their limbs. But the other thing it does is it signals to the baby of, okay, I'm getting wrapped up now. That must mean that it's getting ready for sleep time. And then as part of bedtime routines, we set up stuff around, okay, you do bath and then you kind of put your jammies on and then you brush your teeth and then you have stories and then you go to bed, or whatever order you do. But ideally you do it in the same order each night, and that cues to the child, okay, it's getting ready for bedtime. So then all the rest of this sort of stuff starts happening for them. As adults, we still have sleep associations.
We do.
One of the biggest ones being our pillow. Like if you woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning and your pillow is missing, would you just roll over and go back to sleep, or would you get up and go look for your pillow?
Yeah, you'd probably go and look for it.
Yeah. So you don't actually...
If you freak out, where's my pillow?
True. You don't actually need a pillow in order to sleep, but we like it because it makes it more comfortable, but it's the thing that we associate with sleep, right? So here's the thing. The integrity or the strength of your sleep associations will depend on how well you kind of maintain them purely for sleep. If you really like your pillow and you carry your pillow downstairs and you put it on the couch and you use that throughout the day, then you've actually diluted the sleep association of your pillow, because your pillow is no longer a nocturnal sleep association. All right, same sort of thing with pajamas. Okay, if you choose to wear pajamas, you really should only be wearing pajamas kind of for when you get ready to bed.
Don't wear them all weekend long?
No, I don't want you wearing them all weekend long, because if you can simply keep your pajamas for sleep time, then the act of putting on the pajamas is part of the association.
It cues you.
Exactly, it cues the body to get ready for it. So if you like wearing your jammies, I would strongly encourage you to have like daytime jammies and nighttime jammies. Like switch to your active wear, switch to your lounge wear, whatever. That's the in thing at the moment apparently. But get out of the pajamas that you sleep in and put on something else, because then we can maintain the integrity of pajamas being a sleep association. Other things, again, kind of comes back to the routine of, do you wash your face and then you brush your teeth, then you go to the bathroom and then you go to bed, or kind of whatever you do you read a book, do meditation, that sort of stuff. Now, the other big thing is we actually want your bed to be a sleep association, which means that when you get into bed, your brain goes, okay, we're in bed, that means sleep time. But what most people will do, they'll read in bed, they'll play their phones in bed, they'll watch TV in bed, they'll work on their laptops or do any sort of other thing other than sleep, which can get to the point where you get into bed and your brain goes, oh good, what are we doing now?
Yeah, time for the next project.
Yeah, time for the next project, time for the next activity. So what we strongly encourage you to do is nothing in bed except for sleep and sex. Because that one usually leads to sleep. Anyway.
Well, okay. All right, moving on.
So, arousal. This is all the stuff that is going to influence how we'll wake you up. Caffeine. What's the big one on this?
Okay, so caffeine essentially, it works actually in both places. Okay, so it's a stimulant, so it tends to sort of stir your mind up. So some people with a tendency to anxiety might feel more anxious when they take caffeine. But the other thing it does, just coming back over to our previous, is it effectively lowers the adenosine.
Yeah.
Okay.
So caffeine is an adenosine blocker.
Yeah, that's right. So even though you'll still have the same amount of adenosine, it's not as appreciated by the brain. It's sort of, there's a blockade. Yeah. Okay. Which is why,
it's why it works.
Why it keeps you awake.
Exactly. Yeah. So it basically means that while the adenosine is still in your system, you're not feeling the effects of the adenosine. So you're not feeling kind of the sleepiness that you would have from the adenosine, because caffeine takes it away. But what people also need to remember, caffeine has a half-life of 6 hours. 7 to 8 hours depending on your metabolism, and the older you get, the longer it takes you caffeine to...
Picking on me.
You started it. All right, so your caffeine, but it's also cumulative. So if you have a coffee at 6 and you have a coffee at 9, then you have another one at 12 and another one at 3, that by the time you're having that coffee at 3 o'clock, you've still got like a quarter of your coffee at 6 o'clock in the morning still in your system. So it accumulates throughout the day.
Which is, it's kind of like having, you know, a coffee before you go to bed almost, if you've had that much during the day. And the other thing to note, like a lot of people will say, oh, but I've been drinking tons of coffee all my life and I've always slept just fine. Well, that's fine. I mean, you can get away with all kinds of stuff when you're younger, okay? But as you're older, okay, less so. So caffeine starts knocking people around when they get older. That's just the way it is.
Well, the other thing it'll do is that I'd have people say to me, I take my nighttime meds with a cup of coffee.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I take my sleeping tablets.
I take my sleeping tablets with a cup of coffee, yeah. Here's the thing, right? If you've got a caffeine tolerance, you may get to the point where you're actually able to fall asleep, but the depth of your sleep, the consistency of your sleep is going to be compromised. So while you've got that caffeine on board, you're not going to be getting into the deeper stages of sleep, and you're also more likely to have a lot more wakenings throughout the night, particularly the second half of the night. Yeah. Yeah? Sugar. Your turn. You know this one.
Well, I mean, it increases your, I mean, everyone gets a bit of a bump from the sugar, you know, a little bit of a sort of sugar rush. So, you know, ideally you're not having that before you go to bed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look, it's not, I mean, it'd probably be worse to have a coffee before going to bed than having some sugar before you go to bed. But again, it's just, it's not something that's going to facilitate your sleep.
Yep.
Okay.
What about for those people who are waking up throughout the night and having a midnight snack because either one, they're feeling hungry, which I'm wondering how much of that is insulin signaling, or two, they're bored. So I'll go make myself some toast.
Yeah, so not a great idea. So the problem, it's a sort of a two-edged sword, because the increase in the sugar that you get will give you some more alertness and arousal. So that's not good if you're trying to sleep. Okay. Subsequently, you know, let's say you do go to sleep, or if you don't, you get some insulin production, that causes your blood sugar to come back down again, and that's where you might get hungry. If you're only having a light sleep, you might even wake up from that hunger. Yeah. Right? So you can get on a bit of a roller coaster with sugar.
Yes. And the other part is, I reckon there becomes a habitual component. If you consistently get up, eat throughout the night, then are you waking up and then eating, or are you waking up because your body's saying, hey, it's time for my snack? Yeah. Yeah? All right, alcohol.
Yeah, alcohol's an interesting one. So a lot of people, we get a lot of patients with PTSD and this kind of stuff, and they often, you know, note the fact that they fall asleep a lot better when they take some alcohol, which makes sense. Okay, essentially you're sedating your brain. Yeah. Okay, so you're going to fall asleep. Yeah. You're more like pass out.
You reduce your arousal.
Yeah.
And if you've had enough alcohol, you enter a state of non-wakefulness. Which
well
is
said.
Not the same thing as
well
sleep.
said. Yeah. So there is. I don't think we're getting into it today, but there are stages to sleep that you're supposed to go through. And alcohol, basically, and so do some other sedatives for that matter as well. They muck all that up.
Yeah.
So the sleep quality is not as good. But the other thing is, so you have some alcohol and you fall asleep just fine, well, pass out just fine. Okay. But then what happens is, as you metabolize that alcohol, so however many hours later, you tend to have a really restless night after that. Yes. Okay, so essentially you're in it's like a mild alcohol withdrawal technically, and so your arousal bumps up. You're paying interest on the reduction in arousal that you had from the alcohol. Yeah. So now your arousal is bumped up. Okay. Yeah. And now you're half awake, you're tossing and turning, you're having a rotten old time of it, and that is that's what just happens. All right. Yeah. Now again, when you're younger, you seem to be able to get away with it better. Okay. But as you get older, into your 30s. You know, if you've had too much to drink, often you're having a really lousy night's sleep. And as you get older, it also starts affecting, you know, you get too hot with the withdrawal, and there's all kinds of things that muck up your arousal. So alcohol's a problem. And I guess
sedatives
it more or less the same thing with
particularly sedatives. If we're looking at benzos. We've just done another video on that a week or two ago on the benzos and how they work. But both alcohol and particularly the benzos are a REM sleep blocker, which is one of the reasons why your sleep is more disturbed in the second half of the night, because that's where you've got more of your REM sleep. But the other reason why you have a restless night is because falling asleep is actually a process that involves this sort of stuff, right? If you had so much alcohol that you reached a point of non-wakefulness, you didn't technically fall asleep. So the sort of processes and stuff that's supposed to happen, you missed it. So when you wake up because the alcohol is no longer sedating you, you've then actually got to go through the falling to sleep part of this.
Yeah, but your arousal's high. So
well, and and your arousal's back up.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just for the with benzos we mean things like Valium and Xanax and lorazepam and oxazepam
And Tamaz.
And
Tamaz is common.
yeah,
Temazepam.
yeah, temazepam, and there are related drugs like Stilnox, which aren't technically benzos, but they effectively are the same.
Yeah, and the way they work, kind of the reason that the doctor is prescribing you sleeping meds is because it reduces your arousal.
Oh yeah, I mean people love sedatives because no one likes being hyper aroused when you're trying to sleep.
No.
Okay, but it's counterproductive.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then one of the big things that will actually keep you awake is the more of kind of the psychological processes of what's happening. So if your head's full of stuff, if you're ruminating, if you're catastrophizing, you've got stuff in your head, you're worried about it, it's going over and over and over and over,
Yes.
you're going to be awake.
This is the main thing that keeps people
Yes.
awake. Okay,
Yes.
By I mean I guess, and these are distresses
They're
I
all
guess are
related,
related.
yeah.
Okay, but it's the thoughts that keep people
Yeah.
awake for sure.
Yeah.
I mean. Most people, it's not just like, oh, if I have one less coffee, that'll sort out all my sleep problems. I mean, for some people, that's the case.
Yeah.
But almost always, it's the thoughts that are keeping people
So
awake.
some people will do this, right? So their arousal will be kind of whatever, and then when they approach the point of sleep, they'll have this. And people who worry about going to sleep because I'm worried that I'm not going to be able to get to sleep, or I'm worried that I'm going to have a nightmare, or I'm worried that I'm going to have a bad night and I'm going to be tired tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or now that the world has kind of stopped spinning, for example, I've now got time to reflect on my day and think about that thing that I said to my boss, and oh my God, I can't believe I said that, and what am I going to do about the kids, and we've got to do this, and we've got to do that, and it's everything else, all the other distractions have dropped off.
The thoughts bubble up, okay, and it's irresistible. It's not like you can go, I'm just not going to think about that, okay. So we'll get to it in another clip, but there's a lot of merit in actually taking some time before you go to bed, like an hour before you go to bed.
Yeah.
Let those thoughts bubble up then, and do something with them.
Yes, that's our next video we're going to do. So kind of if your arousal is too high, you're not kind of dropping below that adenosine. Your adenosine will then kind of keep increasing, and then maybe this is kind of 3 o'clock in the morning where finally you get to sleep. Okay, but this is what we're saying with kind of, if you've got too much arousal, no matter how much sleep drive you got, if your arousal always exceeds your sleep drive, you're awake.
And this is what happens in PTSD. So people with PTSD have very high levels of distress.
Yeah.
So they can go 2 days, okay, with barely any sleep at all. But then on the 3rd day, their sleep drive is so high that it exceeds their arousal.
Yeah, and then they
crash.
crash.
And they do get a crash.
Yeah. But this will also be something that we'll see for people who may be in emergency services, or working in hospitals, or working in out on deployment where there is an operational requirement for you to stay awake and function because something's happening.
Yeah.
Right? There's an emergency, there's a catastrophe, there's surgery, or whatever it is that you've got to do. If that requirement for you to stay awake and stay functioning, that arousal will keep you awake. And so that's why some people can stay awake for 36 hours because they've got something to do. But the moment they stop, like we see this kind of with the firefighters when they're kind of fighting the bushfires and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, the intensity of what they're doing is giving them arousal to
adrenaline.
combat their sleep drive. So they don't even notice their sleep drive.
Yeah.
Whereas the opposite example might be something like, let's say, I mean, I've seen this. Let's say you're a security guard at a really sleepy art gallery.
Yeah.
There's nothing going on.
Nothing to do.
There's not even any people around.
Yeah.
Okay, so your arousal is really bottoming out. It's so hard to stay awake in that situation.
Yeah, so it's the absence of an arousal or a stimulation or something. And this is where some people with depression can actually kind of have a nap in the afternoon. They can sleep for 12 hours throughout the night and then have a nap in the afternoon because there's no behavioural activation, they're not doing anything to keep themselves stimulated. So I'm bored, I'm comfy, I'll just have a nap for a few hours. While I'm napping, I don't have to feel.
Yeah.
But the problem with naps is it means your adenosine gets here and then you kind of wipe out a few hours, and then when you kind of start to build, where you would normally get up to here, you kind of only get to about here because you've consumed it.
Yeah. It's the nap can rob your capacity to fall asleep that night. Well, to fall asleep as easily that night.
Yeah.
Okay. So now, if that's what I mean, look, if you're getting naps and you're falling asleep just fine, well, good on you. Okay. But if you're not falling asleep just fine, then having naps isn't probably a great idea.
Yeah. But can you have a nap during the afternoon and then sleep for 8 hours and be happy and functioning? Because if you're having naps and you're still sleeping a lot at night and your mood's crap, then stop having naps and we'll swap that out for behavioural activation.
Okay.
All right, that's my bugbear.
Okay.
Don't like naps.
Fair enough.
All right, now nightmares. This is what seems to happen, right? So you've got your arousal. Ideally, when you fall asleep, your arousal goes down. But what happens with your nightmares is they start doing this, right? You might have a little bit of a dream, but it doesn't breach the adenosine, so you're not waking up. And then you have a really big nightmare, and it comes back up again. And so the arousal actually kind of spikes, particularly in the second half of the night where you've got more REM, so that's where you're going to have more dreaming. You've already kind of used up part of your adenosine, so there's not as much available to you. You breach kind of this threshold of sleep, and you're awake. Arousal comes up.
Yeah, your arousal has just exceeded your sleep drive.
Yep.
And as we said, when your arousal exceeds your sleep drive, you're awake.
Yeah. Now, for some people, it'll be they're up and they're off and they're not getting back to sleep. For others, they can de-arouse, but they've got to kind of work really, really, really hard to get back.
Yeah, you're almost time traveling here, but you're right. I mean, it can take a long time for someone after a nightmare to fall asleep again because it takes them a long time to get their arousal.
Yeah,
actually, what's happening though is they're no longer their sleep drive is not once they're awake. Their sleep drive is actually now moving in this direction.
But then sometimes the people have like a little bad dream and they'll drop down, or they have a big bad dream and it takes them hours and hours to come down. So, but again, nightmares really, the reason why it's problematic is because of the arousal that is generated by the nightmares. Now, talk to me about how prazosin, clonidine, mini-press, blah, 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 work.
Yeah, so in PTSD, nightmares is a massive feature and it's a massive problem. So what we think is going on there is that the nightmare is activating all the things that you would activate if you were in a crisis situation in real life. Okay, so your whole body is becoming more aroused, and that includes adrenaline. Then the adrenaline actually feeds back into the brain, into the nightmare, and intensifies the nightmare. Okay, so then you get more bodily intensification, more adrenaline, until finally you get so aroused, ping, you're awake.
Yeah.
All right. Now what we think, is going on with things like prazosin and clonidine is that you might be having the nightmare. It's sort of a pre-nightmare. It's sort of a scary dream, I guess. Okay. You might even be getting the adrenaline production. Okay. But the adrenaline isn't able to feed back into the parts of the brain because the clonidine and the prazosin sort of block the effect of the adrenaline there. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you get less intensification of the nightmare. Now it doesn't make you immune to nightmares, but just makes it.
But it's going to mean that kind of things stay kind of lower intensity, so you're less likely to be kind of breaching your arousal.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
Okay, and the last one, pain.
Yeah. Well,
it's really hard to sleep when you've got pain.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, chronic pain, even acute pain for that matter, it's all around physiological arousal. So it's if the pain is causing discomfort that you're not able to get to sleep, then it's going to be increasing your arousal. But then also the thoughts about the pain. I hate this pain's really annoying. Why do I have this pain? I'm going to be tired tomorrow. I'm going to be sore tomorrow. All of those sort of thoughts will also drive up the arousal, which again is going to impact on your ability to get to sleep.
Yeah. Look, I mean, if pain is what is causing your increased arousal,
we got to treat the pain.
You've got to treat the pain, and ideally you tackle the root cause of it. But sometimes you can't, so you might be stuck with.
If it's something like fibromyalgia, then there's kind of not so much root cause, but more kind of your relationship to the pain and how you adjust to the experience of pain. Yeah. Okay, so look, you've probably heard of the stuff like sleep hygiene and you've heard of all the different principles, and so we've probably recapped a lot of that. What we hope that we've been able to do for you today is explain why these particular things are recommended for sleep hygiene, so you understand the functions underneath it and the mechanisms that are driving sleep. Yeah. So if you're having difficulty sleeping, it's either your sleep drive is not high enough, or your arousal is too high. That's pretty much it.
Or a combination of those things. Okay. So think, how can I improve my sleep drive? There it is there. Or how can I reduce my arousal? And you address those things there.
Yeah. And check out the website psychcollective.com. We've got some handouts and stuff coming up on this on the website over time, as well as Facebook and Instagram, where we will publish the new stuff as we go. That's enough for now. Stay tuned. We're going to do another one next on specifically managing the thoughts associated with increased arousal.
Critical one.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks guys. See ya.